18 months. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Berthena Nabaa-McKinney, and I'm running as a candidate for school board right here in Donelson-Hermitage in Old Hickory. Just a little bit about my background. I am a 25-year educator, former principal, and MNPS teacher. Currently, I do school improvement and turnaround work for schools and districts across our country. I am running for school board because I'd like to leverage my knowledge and expertise both as a professional or career educator, as well as a parent who has navigated our education system. I have 6 children, 5 who have graduated through Metro Nashville Public Schools. And when I talk about, and then I still have a 3rd grader right here in a District 4 elementary. And so when I talk about my 6 children, one, I had legal custody of my sister, who graduated from McGavock High School in 2004. I also had custody of one of my former students. I took custody of her. She was of Mexican descent. Her parents were undocumented and being deported. And they asked me to take custody of her. So I had custody of her through middle school into high school and was able to give her a chance at success too. And so for me, my vision around education is I want for all of our children what I want for my own. That level of success and that access to success to ensure that our children have access to high quality education that they not only need, but they deserve and have a right to. And we need to make sure that as we're preparing them for college and career and workplace readiness, that they have a strong foundation in elementary that prepares them for middle school, that prepares them for the coursework that they're going to receive once they get to high school and post-graduation. So thank you, Dr. Berthena from Metro Schools.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you guys for coming out. I know it's 6 o'clock at night, you're hungry, got things to do at home, but thank you for being here with us. I know we all appreciate it. So my name is Kelli Phillips. I'm a local mom of 3. I was born and raised here in Nashville. I wanted to run for school board because I felt that whether you were a parent, a support staff, a teacher, a bus driver, a security officer within our schools, that you needed a voice. I personally wanted to know that I had a voice. I have, like I said, 3 children. So my oldest is 20. I have a 17-year-old that's currently at McGavock. She's a junior. And my youngest just turned 3 last month. So I have a little bit of an age gap between all my kids. So I've been in the metro school systems for quite some time. I watched my 3-year-old struggle during COVID, learning to speak. That's what got me involved in this. Each of us in this room can name 10 different reasons why the school board race is important to us, but for me it was my 3-year-old. Each one of my children are different. Our children are not one size fits all. We need a school board that recognizes that. My 20-year-old was not a college-bound child. I knew that. I love that about him. He currently works in one of the fields that John was talking about. He's an HVAC technician. He loves what he does, and I'm so proud of him. My junior wants to go to college, and I'm so proud of her for that. So I want our children, no matter what they want to be ready and prepared. And I want to listen, and I want you to know that you're heard. And until all of our children are reading and writing at grade level standards, and we don't have less than 30% of our children reading and writing where they need to be, then until we get to that point, we have a lot of work to do. Again, I'm Kelli Phillips. Thank you so much.
Y'all know I'm going to trip over this cord at some point tonight.
All right, so we're going to start with the softball question. What are the biggest issues affecting MNPS today, and how would you fix it?
So I'll start this time. When I think about MNPS and my day job that I work at National Propel, which is a parent advocacy group. It stands for Parents Requiring Our Public Education System to Lead. And so a lot of times I give bird's eye view of what parents are feeling. And the funny thing, you would think that parents want to make sure that they go to a strong school, an academically strong school, but what I've realized that they first care about safety. And when you think about schools now, just talking to parents week in and week out, I think Kelli touched on it a little bit, but it's some clusters in our district where the elementary school, only 5% of the kids can read on grade level. When they go to the middle school, only 5% of them can read on grade level. And when they get to high school, less than 5% of them can read on grade level. And for me, I think that's criminal, but also it sets the child up for failure if they can't leave school and have the ability to be productive and have a good job. And a lot of times that's what we forget. You know, when we were doing the drive-by graduations, I just started to think as I was watching my cousin graduate, like, what about all the kids who wasn't driving through them? What about the kids who rode around in a circle and when it was over, they had nothing to go to? And so first and foremost, we need to get literacy right and make sure kids can read. But also, you know, they say it's the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. But if you can't read, there's gonna be an issue with doing both of those.
So sorry. Try not to trip each other on this cord. So that's a great question. I serve as one of the board members for the MNPS Parent Advisory Council of the PAC. And the PAC serves parents and engages parents across our district, from every cluster of our district. I also, during the have held listening sessions with both parents, students, and teachers within our schools. One of the major challenges that families are facing, including safety, is around social, emotional, and the mental well-being of both our students and our staff. It has been a struggle and a challenge across our district. Our teachers are short-staffed, our support staff are short-staffed, and our students, we can say that the pandemic has caused it, but it has exacerbated the social, emotional, and mental support that's needed for students and staff across our district. And so I say, before learning can take place within our classrooms, we need to eliminate the barriers that exist so that learning can begin within our classroom, and so that teachers can teach within our classrooms. And so I would say, between our staffing and our social, emotional, and mental well-being supports that are needed, those are two major challenges that we need to fix. To address that, I would say our district has started adding advocacy centers, as well as restorative practice centers within our elementary, middle, and high schools. I would like to see us expand upon those and direct funding where funding needs to be, to continue to enhance it and provide the professional development, not only for those individuals that work in those centers, but for our staff, to create a culture around social, emotional, and mental well-being. I want to see us increase with social workers and mental health workers and all of that. And I would like us to address the staffing crisis that we have across the district, so that we can have the staff in place to do what we need to do, which ultimately is supporting our children. Thank you.
Let's see, I feel like we're gonna jump rope here. See this? No, you're good. Look, we're gonna do this.
So I think
Let's see this.
Discord is our nemesis tonight, I think. So I think one thing that you're gonna see the three of us agreeing on is that the first priority for any school board candidate and any parent is going to be getting our children reading and writing at grade level standard. That's one thing that all three of us agree on, and that's not gonna change. I think for me, the past several months, I've been on the other side of this as a parent speaking out. For me, I think watching teachers speak out at board meetings. When I first started speaking at the board meetings in August, you didn't see a whole lot of teachers or support staff speaking out in frustration. Over the past few months, I've seen that change. We just recently learned that we have at least 10 executive principals resigning at the end of this school year. 10. Sorry, I didn't mean to blow y'all out with the microphone. That's unheard of. We have teachers quitting at an alarming rate, and not only are they quitting, we don't have teachers that want to come in and take their place. We have security guards that don't want to go work in our schools right now. It's not a conducive environment for people who are supposed to be there to nurture and enrich our children. If we can't let those people know that we're going to give them a place for them to be what they're supposed to be and be the best they can be for our children, then we are doing every child in our school district and every district in Nashville a disservice. So, like I said, reading and writing at grade level, of course. But if we don't have teachers, support staff, bus drivers that are doubling and tripling their routes to take our kids to school for those parents that have to work 2 and 3 jobs to put food on the table and a roof over their head right now, we aren't going to have schools to send them to.
Thank you. The next question is a long one. It's MNPS's preliminary budget presentation, which includes a continuity of operations budget, shows that more than $7.6 million would be needed for teacher and staff step increases under the district's current pay structures. It also showed that a 1% cost of living adjustment would cost another $5.5 million. Do you agree with this preliminary budget? Do you think it's too little, too much, or just enough? And if it's not enough, what would you propose and how would you achieve it?
Thank you for that. That was a loaded one.
I'm so glad you're
Yeah. So today is a different day, and so I'm going to try to answer because I've been working the polls, I've been paying attention to the news and reading in Tennessee, and then today we had the state of Metro where the mayor introduced his budget, which allocated, and don't call me on the numbers, but I want to say 91, I was going to say 96, $91 billion. And so one of the things that I've been fighting for and pushing for in meeting with bus drivers, and so when I get calls and emails and texts from parents, I start to look for a trend. And you know, one trend that has been coming up is, where's my kid? The bus was supposed to be here 30 minutes ago. The bus was supposed to be here an hour ago. And so I immediately started talking to bus drivers. I was lucky to have one of the bus drivers who went to high school with me. She introduced me to the bus drivers union. And listening to them, you just realize there were some things that as Nashville continues to grow, that we were leaving the bus drivers behind, and now unfortunately the reality is they're leaving the kids behind. And so as we think about our budget, as we think about the money that the mayor is allocating, I have to look at it tonight and look at it tomorrow, and as the council starts to hash it out, I see we have some council members in here. So the way it goes, he presents his budget, they send it to the 40-member body, and they can keep it or do different things with it. And so I will be interested to see what we do. I know he put a COLA in there, and again, I think he proposed 4%, which is a cost of living adjustment. I tell people when I started at Stewart's Ferry Apartments, my rent in 2009 was $450, and they gave me a month free. By the time I left Stewart's Ferry and a few years ago, it had risen to $1,300, and they always laughed at me when I asked for a pay stop because they said my apartment was one of the lowest. And so we have real issues in the district that we need to figure out. Thank you.
Can you ask that question one more time?
Sure. So MNPS's preliminary budget includes a continuity of operations budget, and it shows that $7.6 million would be needed for teacher and staff step increases under the district's current pay structures. It also shows that a 1% cost of living adjustment would cost another $5.5 million. Do you agree with this preliminary budget, or do you think it's too little, too much, or just enough? And if it's not enough, what would you propose and how would you achieve it?
Okay, thank you. To start off, the mayor did make an announcement today that he would dedicate $91.2 million towards education, which is a $10 million increase than last year. And so last year was a historic investment. This year was a historic investment. So I have to give kudos to our mayor for prioritizing education. Not just saying that he prioritizes education, but putting his money where his mouth is. in doing so. And I hope and pray that our Metro Council supports this initiative so that we can prioritize education. I think part of that historic investment is 4% cost of living across the board for teachers and support staff. Also paid medical leave or maternity leave, family leave across the board for every Metro Nashville public school employee, which has never been the case. And the other thing is an increase for our support staff across our district, and that's from bus drivers to school staff and all of that. So all of our support staff across our district, which is a major investment. My concern, however, is not our city making major investments, it's our state. Currently, our state is looking at reallocation of how they fund public education. With this new funding framework, which is called TISA, I want everyone in our community to be engaged and be well informed in this. Nashville is expected to receive one of the lowest allocations out of the 147 districts across our state. Now, putting that in perspective, we are the second largest school district that serves almost 10% of the students across the state, and we are receiving the lowest allocation of any other school district across our state. That's a crime, and we need to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to fix it. Thank you.
That's a lot to get in 2 minutes, so here we go. I'll probably come at this a little bit different than they do, just because, as you'll know, I'm kind of on a different perspective from this. So, as a mom who has recently watched prices raise, about pass out every time I go to the pumps and fill up our tank, okay? $1 is $1, a penny's a penny. We need to look at the amount of money our schools have been given in the past. Where has the money gone that we have already gotten? How did we spend the money that we have already been given? Was it spent wisely? Did you know the director of the schools makes $285,000? And her assistants make at least $185,000? Do you know what I could do with $185,000? That's a lot of groceries at Aldi's, y'all. That's a lot. So, before we need to talk about how much money is coming in here now, let's go back and look at where the money has gone. Because there are children out there that do need that money, and there are programs out there that could really have used that money. So the first thing we all need to do is find out, where did it go? There is never going to be enough money in any budget for one single teacher or support staff or bus driver. Those people help raise our children when we are not with them. That is a selfless job. They will never get paid enough money. So, like I said, I kind of come at that a little different. I just want to see us find out exactly how every single nickel and dime was spent of the millions of dollars that we have gotten over the past few years. And then let's talk about how to allocate the money that's getting ready to come into our bank account. Thank you.
All right, next question. Last year, MNPS reported that there was a shortage of over 300 teachers and a 16% turnover rate. Some cite the pandemic as a compelling factor in the shortage. Others remark that increasing stress and decreasing mental health of our teachers are also likely reasons. What do you think are the causes of the teacher shortage, and what would you do to rectify it?
I'll move it down. We'll have Dr. McKinney start.
It's okay, I could have came behind. So around teacher shortages, I have been a teacher in the classroom, and being in the classroom with large classroom sizes can already be stressful and taxing within itself. I've also been a school principal that has worked with budgets, and having to allocate budget and design budgets to best meet the needs of our staff, both our teachers and our support staff and all of our wraparound staff is also challenging. I think the pandemic has not only exacerbated that, but I think the political discourse around education has also been a challenge across our community. Teachers, if you listen to the political discourse around education right now, teachers are not being respected for the hard work that they do, for the hard work that they put in, for showing up every day to work to meet the needs of our kids. I think the challenge of social, emotional, and mental health support contributes to that. I think staffing shortages contribute to that. And one way that we really need to address is really work on retention. So making sure that we are paying our teachers and our support staff the pay in which they deserve. Ensuring that we are respecting their profession, right? And respecting them as the professionals that they are. I think another challenge is around social, emotional, and mental health support of not only our students, but our staff as well. We need to make sure that we have systems in place that are really addressing that. And I think finally, legislation also has an impact on how teachers are able to teach within classrooms and the constraints that are put on them as well. And so it's multi-tiered in many ways in which we can address it.
Yes, exactly what you said about it being multi-tiered. There's a lot to unpack with that. Over the past several years, our country has gone through something that we as a country, we as a world have never gone through. We were locked inside our homes. We were separated from each other. None of us had been through that before. Our teachers went from getting to see our kids every day to having to try to teach kids as young as 5 years old how to do things that they're used to doing in person. That was hard. And if you're a teacher, like I know all the teachers I've ever had are, and the teachers that my kids have had, they loved what they do. They put 110% of themselves in it every day. And I know so many of them were so frustrated and struggled for the past couple of years trying to do that virtually. Like I said earlier, not every kid is one size fits all. So I think a lot of our teachers have experienced the mental fatigue of trying to be their best and doing their best over the past 2 years in a circumstance that was so hard for them to do. And watching their children not be their best academically, that's hard for a teacher that loves their kids. So a teacher at the end of the day is just like you or I sitting in this room. If you're stressed about other things because you're maybe not making enough money to pay your bills because everything else is costing more, that needs to be addressed. Because any of us can say with 100% honesty, none of us can do our best if we're stressed whether we're going to be able to pay our bills or put food on the table. So our teachers are our front lines to our kids. So I think we need to make sure that they have the support they need, and we need to recognize what they have been through the past several years and given of themselves in a situation that was so impossible for so many, and they made the best out of it. So I applaud our teachers.
Thank you. Sometimes I smile to keep from crying, but when we think about like morale, and maybe this is not scientific, but we have to think and humanize that teachers are people too. And in my time of working in schools, I remember teachers would graduate and come into the classroom for the first year, and we would all fraternize and socialize, and there would be 3 teachers living in one place, and they would all be paying rent. And that was back from 2011 to 2015. And the same way my bills are going up, teachers are affected by that as well. And so I followed a couple of teachers for a few days just to see the life. I came into the classroom at McGavick, they invited me in, and so I saw how their day went. I walked around the hallways just listening and writing down. And when you think about morale, you really just have to think about how the cost of living has gone up, how their wages have remained the same, and how their workload has gotten heavier. And when you have all those factors, it's just, you can only take so much. And so when we think about last year, my first year on the board, we celebrated making teachers the highest paid in the state. And we clapped and we cheered. And you know what teachers did this year? They came back and said, but it's still not enough. because Nashville is just that expensive. And I also want to apply teachers. I really appreciate talking to them, and they were like, we will hold off from some of the things that we want from this budget to make sure bus drivers, the lunch people, paraprofessionals get what they need, because this is a partnership. And so gone are the days of divide and conquer. Like, we have to continue to go through, like, how do we really support our teachers and our support staff and people who work for Metro? What does that number look like? Do we need to do a pay study for that? And just have a realistic conversation in this school district. So we won't say you're the highest this year and next year you still have to come back for more. Thank you.
All right. Next question has some details to it, so I'll be slow. Last year, Nashville had 21 schools on the Tennessee Department of Education's priority list. And when you take a look at the demographics of these schools, most of the children attending these schools come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds or come from minority backgrounds. How would you address these educational disparities to achieve parity for all students in the MNPS system? And why don't we start with Kelli?
I think that's a great question. I think that the job of any Metro school system is going to be to provide a quality education to any child, regardless of their economic background. And I think this question is going to go back to our budgeting and how our money is allocated. So I think for all children, they need to be given a school that makes them feel safe, makes them feel nurtured, and gives them the hope and faith that they can be anything they want to be when they leave the doors of that school. That's an all-inclusive question that pretty much, I would say, sums up a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. If you have teachers that can give their all, if you have support staff that can give their all, and if you have a school system as a whole that is functioning, because the money is where it needs to be. There's not a perfect answer for any question, but any school system, the perfect solution is supposed to be that any child can walk through those doors and get an education to be whatever they want to be, regardless of their background.
So, yeah, we started with 21 priority schools, and they're mostly in Black and brown and poor communities. And when we think about, it was 21 since the pandemic, we have lost a few, but the only way we have taken schools off the priority list, not that they have done academically better, but there have been schools across the state that have done worse. And so one of the reasons why I really started to explore the board, you know, in college I read about the caste system. And in India, they said if you're born poor, you stay poor, not for one generation, but for 100 generations. And so it's no way out. When I look at our education system for some kids in these communities since desegregation, those schools have always been low performing. I remember I went to Stratford and I went to go see a friend in Casey Homes in East Nashville. And it perplexed me that the mom was living in the housing projects doing the best, but the grandmother was there and then the daughter was planning to be there, and there was generational poverty. And so when we think about, like, how do we solve these issues, I go back to the Maplewood and the Whites Creek cluster. When I look on the website, that none of those schools from elementary to middle to high school are reading or doing math or any subject on grade level. And so how do we fix it? Like, we really have to slow down and build a relationship. We need more money, but you can't throw money at the problem. You have to say, who is Berthena? What does she need? Because it's gonna be different from what Kelli needs or what I need. And so if we really wanna fix the problem, we have to understand who we're working with as parents and families and communities, and then we have to build them up the best way we know how. We have a lot of excellent educators who can do it. We just have to slow down and treat them as individuals and not a one-size-fits-all model.
Thank you for that question. School improvement and turnaround work is my jam, y'all, so that we could have a whole conversation about this. But I always say, if you have a school that has the resources, that has the funding and the resources that it needs, and it's still not performing, let's have a conversation. right? How many of you remember No Child Left Behind? How many kids got left behind, right? During that legislation. How many of you remember Race to the Top? When there was a lot of funding that was poured into low-performing schools to help improve them. And as soon as they came up, what did they do? They took the funding and put it somewhere else, right? So when it comes to improving our low-performing schools, one, we have to make sure that we have experienced educators who are in those schools, right? With the training and the resources, we have to make sure that those teachers and that support staff and that community is connected to the community of students they are serving. Because kids don't learn from people they don't like. And we need to make sure that we're building a culture and climate of learning and success for every student in that school. Does that mean one size fits all? No, that means that we are meeting kids where they are and we are helping them to grow and develop and enrich themselves for a level of success that prepares them from elementary to middle to high school in all of those cases. So to kind of address that question, one, we need to make sure that our schools have the resources that they need. And so when we say equitably funding, that's what we mean. One school may not need the same resources that another schools need. All of our schools are not one size fits all either. And so we have to look at it from that model. Thank you.
Thank you. On the subject of charter schools, in your opinion, what is their place in MNPS?
So right now we have a few. We have public charter schools that are authorized by MNPS board. And when I think about it, my true belief is, who am I to tell a parent what to do with their kid, whether it's at a public charter, whether it's at a magnet school, or whether it's at a private school. I think where we are in education, we know education is the all-time equalizer. And so I really believe in putting that choice in front of parents, and doing it in a way that doesn't slow down the growth, but also doesn't take away options for parents. When I think about, we got some other kind of charters that are coming in, I would say I think it's Hillsdale College. Hillsdale was an initiative through the state, and that is something that I'm 100% against because it's not from the community. It's driven through a state initiative. And I think right now in the state, we have 147, maybe 124 charter schools. And that initiative was to bring 150, and I thought it was tone deaf, and I thought it didn't understand the needs of our community. And so those are things that we do need to be against.
So I'm an advocate for a parent, guardian having a choice, having a voice. And I've watched John over his 18 months on the board honor that with his charter school decisions. I do believe in charter schools. I believe that a parent should be able to find the environment that will be best for their child. I know there's divisiveness amongst charter school decisions, and I understand that. But I also think that at the end of the day, like we've been talking about, that one child might thrive in an environment that another child might not. You have to find the environment that is best for your child. I think charter schools offer an option to some parents, and I think it should be there. So I am an advocate for charter schools. So if anybody is out there that wants to talk to me about that, I want to hear from people about that. I do. I want to hear if you have personal experiences about it. But I always want parents and guardians to have the option to send their child, grandchildren to the school that's going to be best for them.
Thank you for that question. I'll start by saying that I truly, wholeheartedly respect a parent's right to choose the best education program for their children. However, I am a fan of locally and zoned schools. I believe as a parent, as a community member, we have got to invest in our locally and zoned schools across our community. We have a right and we have a responsibility, and we have a responsibility to hold them accountable and make them the first choice in education for families across their community. However, I participated in choice. My children all attended an MNPS school. They did not attend a charter, but they did attend schools across the community because, again, one size does not fit all for our kids. But I feel as MNPS is concerned, we have a lot of choices and options for our children. I have one child that graduated from McGavick High School and went into the trade. She's cosmetology. I have 2 children that came out of Antioch High School and both went college track and were successful. I had a daughter who went to Hillsborough High School through the IB program that was offered there and was successful, and my son went to MLK. So there's a lot of choice options across MNPS. I am just a big fan of ensuring that we are investing in our locally and zoned schools and making it the best choice or the first choice for families, so that our kids don't have to travel across town to find strong options. We want them right here within our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Just a little logistical halftime. We've got 3 more prepared questions, and then we've got our audience questions that we're going to take, and we'll wrap up around 7:45. Just want to let you know. But our next prepared question is, the Tennessee recently reported that less than half of MNPS high school graduates went on to college last year, and this is the lowest percentage in more than a decade. Do you think this is a problem, and how do you address it?
I think we've been in a pandemic, and I don't want to jump to conclusions on just where the numbers are, but I think we also have a unique opportunity. You know, one thing that the pandemic taught us is to be nimble and to be able to make quick changes as we deal with technology. You know, I remember the first day of virtual learning, and we didn't have internet. Our internet went out, and I was using my hotspot, and at 1 p.m., his computer was off because, we didn't have any more internet for the whole month. And so when I talk about college, career, and community ready, like this serves as a unique opportunity that we can look into. Maybe college isn't for everyone. And I'll tell you, when I first started in education, I was the one with the banner that said everyone should go to college. But then, I had to get my AC unit fixed, and I got that bill. And then I had to get my house rewired, and I got that bill, and somebody had to paint. And I realized that college is amazing, but some kids work well with their hands, and some kids don't want to go the traditional route. And so as we look at the low numbers, historically low, I also want to give us the grace of getting out of the pandemic, but also using this unique opportunity to build and forge better relationships with our trades. One thing that I've just heard in the community, right at the polls, is contractors who live in this community in Donelson-Hermitage and Old Hickory. And what I would hear is, we can't find good talent in the city, and so they spend a lot of time going outside of Nashville. And those are jobs that our students can have through an apprenticeship or through a direct job link. And so when I think about it, great, the numbers are low and we need to work on that, but I also think it's an opportunity to invest in the trade.
Thank you so much for that question. Metro Nashville Public Schools currently does have trade or vocational programs across every high school in our district. McGavick High School has a great aerospace trade program. They have a great veterinary tech program. They have a restaurant within there. They have a court. They have a credit union. So there are trade programs across Metro Nashville Public Schools. They're there. They've renamed it as Academies of Nashville, but it's the same thing, it's vocational programs. What I would like to see is an expansion of our vocational programs within our schools to connect with jobs that we currently have here and that we have a need for across our community. I also want to make sure that our kids have exposure as well. And so traditionally, students in Black and brown and poor communities have only been directed towards trade jobs. And I want to make sure that they are not only directed towards trade jobs, but they understand that there are other opportunities as well. So if they want to go into auto mechanics, they also are prepared to maybe go into an engineering program where they are creating the cars instead of fixing it and building up on top of that. So we want to create not only exposure to our trade programs, but we want to also create exposure to opportunities on top of that that expands that as well. So one thing that I have seen with a lot of children going through our school system is, I don't think I can go to college. I don't think I'm the person to be able to do so, because they have never been given that opportunity. And so when we would say that we want our kids college or career ready, we want to expose them to both college access and preparation and career trade access and preparation, and whichever they choose is the best fit for them. Thank you.
I think a lot of these answers you're going to hear are going to come back to the fact, like he was talking about, like John was saying, is that we have come out of a pandemic. We can't ignore that. It's what we've lived through. When a lot of these children were virtual, a lot of the children, the numbers were dropping off of the children that were logging into these virtual classes. And teachers had to go back and get these kids and pull them back in on these online classes. I think it's going to be years before we really see what the educational loss was when we start with these younger children, such as a 5-year-old, and watch them come up through, elementary school and middle school. It's going to take that amount of time to really see what we did lose. So I think what Berthena was saying about the trade being in school, my daughter's at McGavick, and she's in the Digital Design Academy. Loves it. My son was in the Auto Diesel Academy. That's where he learned he wanted to be an HVAC technician. He might not be working on cars right now, but he sure learned he loved to work with his hands. That was the best thing that happened for him. So I'm forever thankful to McGavick High School for that. So I think we have a real opportunity right now coming out of COVID and seeing where we are and seeing our children really falling behind. Instead of looking at the negative of this, which we have to acknowledge it. But let's look at this and say, look, what can we do moving forward at where we are? We're pretty low on the reading and writing. We have a really great opportunity right now to restructure and listen to each other as a school board, as a community, as parents, grandparents, guardians, to input. Let's take that opportunity. I think it could be a really great thing, and our kids, at the end of the day, are the ones who will benefit from that every single time.
Great, thank you. I've got 2 more questions. This is another 2-minute question, and it's a long one, but it's a good one. So I will speak carefully. Recently, various school districts and legislatures, including our own Tennessee legislature, have contemplated banning literature from schools that they deem obscene or harmful to minors. Critics state that these bans are an overreach and may even infringe on a student's First Amendment rights if the removal is based on an unconstitutional motivation. Proponents state that these bans are in pursuit of removing obscenity and profanity from educational materials and to protect our children. So, what's your take? Yeah, we'll start.
So this is probably one of the most divisive questions we will have this evening, but I'm happy to take this one first. Public schools are just that. They are publicly funded learning institutions. If there are books available to our youngest children, which is my biggest problem, K through 3rd grade, if it is a book that you cannot read openly or show a picture to at your dinner table without it being deemed inappropriate, then I do not feel it should be in a publicly funded learning institution. Last month, there were some hearings on Capitol Hill. Law enforcement was there and said some of the books that were available in our libraries, if a teacher were to take a picture of it and send it to a student, albeit part of an assignment, that teacher could be charged with distribution of pornography. So A, do we want to put a teacher in a position where that's really what could happen? And on the flip side of that, if there was a book, say it was the opposite argument, if you don't agree with some books being restricted, we're still trying to fight for the right to make sure that our children are protected either way. At the end of the day, your dollar goes into the schools, my dollar goes into the schools. Level playing field. But I do not think our young children need to have access to some of the books that I've seen them having access to. I'm happy to give examples through email if you want to give me your email addresses, okay? I'm very open about that. Thanks.
So my email is open, and so the things that when I sit in the board meeting, I think we had a group that comes once a month. I think it's Moms for Liberty. And they take their 3 minutes to read books, I think, that are in the school system. But so far in my inbox, I haven't seen anything, and I look forward, if there are things that I've seen in our schools, I definitely want to see it. But I think one thing also is I work with parents, and I self-identify as a Democrat. One thing that I just try to say, let's keep politics outside of the classroom, whether it's left or whether it's right. Let's just make sure our kids first can read, do math, can write well, and then we can look at, as you start to get to high school, like reading books that may be age appropriate. But I think for right now, it hasn't been an issue that's made it in my inbox, and my only interaction has been from the parent group that comes to speak to the board.
I went blank on the question, banned books, and inappropriate books within our classrooms. So currently MNPS and the state has a policy about the types of books that can go into our schools. There's regulations with our librarians. They have some of the strictest regulations there is out there, and that's from federal to state to local around textbooks and access. Also, there is a policy in place that allows parents the right to choose the type of books their children bring home. That's currently within MNPS as well. Even when it comes to curriculum, if a teacher is teaching a curriculum that could be divisive, they send that home, and parents have a right to say, I don't want my children to learn this, and they're given an alternate assignment. So those policies are currently in place within MNPS. A lot of parents are not aware of it, and I think we need to communicate those policies more openly so that parents know that they have that right and that access. As far as textbooks are concerned and the banning of textbooks, I want to make sure children have age-appropriate material within the classroom. I have, as you guys said, I have 5 children that have already graduated through MNPS. I have a current 3rd grader. I've been a teacher in the classroom. I've been in leadership. I have never seen, personally, any of the books that we have seen now. I know that our libraries are connected to the Limitless Library and our Nashville Public libraries, and those are also connected to wider libraries, and so there is access. But again, I went onto the Limitless Library, tried to pull a book up. They won't even send it to the children to the school if it's deemed inappropriate. If it's not within grade level according to that. So there are policies and laws already in place that prohibit obscene and inappropriate materials from getting access to our children.
Great, thank you. This last question we're just going to take a minute for so we can get to the audience questions. This question is, people that run for school board always say they want to make a difference. Considering today's environment, what does making a difference look like to you?
What does making a difference look like to me? I think changing the trajectory of a kid's life. I think the first meeting that I had when I was elected to the school board was a governance meeting, and we did book club. And it took me out of the mindset of running for office. Literally, you see me running around town, back and forth, picking up kids, working the library, trying to eat, to actually being in the boardroom and dealing with a $1.3 billion budget when our city's budget is $2.6 billion. I think at the end of the day, as a board member, we have 3 roles and responsibilities. One is to pass a budget, and when I think about passing the budget has to benefit our people. Why have the money if we're not moving anything or changing lives? And so I want to make sure our budget is changing the lives, not only of the students, but the people who create our ecosystem in education. Oh, I forgot we had 1 minute.
I was just thinking the same thing. That was a good 2 minutes. Oh, okay.
So I think to make our schools be the best they can be, we need to start with making sure we have the support staff, the teachers, the bus drivers. We have to make sure the money is there to let our schools function again. Like I said, losing 10 executive principals is unheard of. That's 10 schools right now that don't know what they're going to do this fall when it starts back. So we have to have those people in place to make sure our children are reading and writing at grade level standards. I want to make sure that the money that does come into the school system is spent the best way for each school within the district. And I want to make sure that parents, staff, everyone that comes to speak at the board meetings, everybody that's a part of the community, whether they go to the board meetings or not, knows that they're heard. Now, John, I talked to him for the first time on the phone in August. I did. But I think the community needs to see a cohesiveness amongst our board and a level of respect that might not be there right now.
So Nelson Mandela said that education has the power to change the world, right? And so every time that we educate a child, that's an opportunity for that child to make an impact and change the world, one person at a time. And one thing that I want to see as a board member to be able to make that change is to ensure that we are student-centered in every decision that we make. And in order to be student-centered, we have to invest in our teachers and our support staff. We have to invest in the social, emotional, and mental well-being of not only our students, but our staff. We have to address learning gaps and learning outcomes to ensure that our kids are academically prepared at every tier of their K-12 education. We have to make sure that we have strong family, student, community partnerships because it takes a village to make sure that we are educating our community. Thank you.
Thank you all. We're going to head into some audience questions, and one of the first ones we received is that MNPS parents have lamented about numerous platforms that they are required to access to receive grades, assignments, and other communications, such as Schoology and Infinite Campus, to name a few. Is there an opportunity to streamline these platforms, and if so, do you support it?
Absolutely, yes. So I have a 3rd grader. I deal with Infinite Campus and Schoology. And so going back and forth between the 2 platforms can sometimes be cumbersome. And working with families through the MNPS Parent Advisory Council, we have done a lot of training through the pandemic, even now really supporting families and navigating it. I know the district is making steps. They have asked for parent feedback. They have parents who have joined the team to provide feedback to improve the practices so that we understand and we receive access to student information so that families can help support and the school can help support. So it's one way. So if we can make it more, what was the word you used? Mine went blank, but if we could streamline it to make it easier for access for all families, I would say absolutely 100%. Thank you.
I was just on there yesterday trying to check grade on some things. So for me, my answer to that would be If something hasn't worked in the past and whoever we've been using or the process we've been going through to put that in place, let's reevaluate that first. However much money we've spent on that in the past to get us where we are now. If somebody came to fix your air conditioning and it didn't work, you wouldn't keep paying them to come back and fix it if it still wasn't working. So let's look at the other avenues to get a better service. I know for me, I want to pull my hair out every time I try to go find something and I can't. And then my 17-year-old hops on there in 2 seconds and rolls her eyes at me because I know they get it a lot faster than I do. But I think we need to reevaluate maybe where we're going for that. And if we're going to spend that money, let's make sure we know where the money, who the money's going to, and let them do it right.
Thank you. No, all good. So I'm gonna use the word streamline on this. So we have Schoolology. We also have the personalized student dashboard that was introduced this year. And when I think about it, one of the policies that I was really pushing for was a PLP, which is a personalized learning plan, because I thought that it's very hard in today's world to create a school system that's a one-size-fits-all. For some, it's not going to be enough. For some, it's going to be too much, and they'll be overwhelmed. And so, when I think about the personalized student dashboard, I think about our PLT time. I really want us to take the time to look at each individual student and see where they are. If they are ahead in reading but behind in math during PLT, let's really take that time. As we implemented these policies again, I wanted to be in the classroom and see how it looks, and it's very hard for teachers to operationalize, and I would tell you some people view it as playtime. And so I think when we have these two platforms, we really gotta use them for the strength and put them together. And we got PLT, which is in the morning time where students are supposed to be going over assignments. You have the personalized student dashboard that allows parents to look at how their students are doing, whether it's ACT or grades, and make sure we create a personalized learning plan to meet that kid or those kids where they are, so we can grow them academically, socially, emotionally, culturally, because we are treating them as individuals.
All right, thank you. The next question says this. It's from the audience. McGavick is never full, but it is aging and long distance. Will you support a new high school in Hermitage? And do you want to take it? I was going to pass it down the line.
Okay, she'll go first.
I can go. During the time that I was on the school board and running before, we had several conversations about a new high school in this area. Especially right around the Old Hickory, Hermitage community is really looking for that new high school. I know at one point I talked with Darren Jernigan, Representative Darren Jernigan, and he had put some legislation in place to try to allocate some funding, and that bill didn't pass at the time. And really looking at it, you're right, McGavick is not full at this time, and dictating a new high school really depends on capacity. So when I was teaching at Antioch High School, we were over capacity, and during that time, they took the freshmen and put them in JFK Middle School and created the first freshman academy. And then as a result of that, because of the overcrowding, and I remember Antioch was so overcrowded that they sent kids to McGavick High School, way across town because of the overcrowding. And then when they opened up Cane Ridge, that reduced numbers at McGavick High School, no longer dictating the need for them to do another high school. So I think as we continue to look at our city growing, especially in the Donelson-Hermitage and Old Hickory area, and we continue to look at our projections, because houses are still going up, developments are still going up, that will dictate whether we have the need to push to get that second high school. What I am more concerned about is the repairs and the upgrades that are needed at McGavick High School, because there's a lot of upgrades and capital improvements that are needed there. And so I would like to see a better use of our funding than building the current new high school, because we don't need it at this moment, is fixing the upgrades and the capital improvement needs that are needed right there. Thank you.
Which way? Just swing it. So you can use it first.
I completely agree with the fact that we need to invest the money that we do have coming in McGavick. In reality, it would be great to build a new high school out towards Old Hickory, because I know there's a lot of people moving out there, and that's a long bus ride from Old Hickory to McGavick in August when it's 110 degrees in that bus. That's a hot bus ride. However, I have a student at McGavick, and I know some of you that I see in here have students there. That school needs a lot of repair. It needs a lot of work. And our children deserve a nice, shiny place to learn. It's not got to be brand new, but it has to be functioning, and it has to be clean. And we do the best we can with what we have, but we need to do a little better. And I'm sure that we can, arrange something. If people need to see the state of some of these schools, whether it's this district or another district, I'm sure you can. But I know McGavick needs money invested in it before we put any money anywhere else. And with the cost of things going up, I can't even imagine what it would cost to build a new high school at this point. So let's put that money in the school that we have and the students that we need to invest in.
Thank you. I'm gonna go a little different. Like when I think about the historical overview of how McGavick came about, you have to look at it in the 70s when we had desegregation, and you had the Donelsons and the Old Hickory schools had to shut down because they couldn't reach the threshold from the federal order. Now that federal order is away, like they created McGavick to combine all of those high schools into one so they can meet the mark. Reinvesting into the current McGavick school to me is not an option. One, from what I've seen personally with my eyes, with the rat poop, with the mold, the black mold and everything, and from what the pictures that teachers are sending me. I think we have a unique opportunity where we can shrink the size of the school. When I talk to Old Hickory parents and they say, if my child misses the bus, they just don't go to school. And I think where we are in 2022, we could develop an opportunity where we can create something that's closer to them. We can shrink the size of the current McGavick, because honestly, it's a health issue with a lot of those things that are going on at the school, because it was built in the 70s when we had to combine all of our schools in Donelson, Old Hickory, and Hermitage.
Thank you. Our next question from the audience is, there has been a plethora of conversations in school boards about CRT. I think this is critical race theory. Can you define CRT and provide specific examples of CRT being taught in our schools?
And I'm gonna just take a seat on this one. I don't even want to give, I think we have a lot of, what do you call it? Like things that distract you or smoke. I always tell the story, when I was in 4th grade, I loved to read, and I remember reading about Hannibal. He was a white man crossing the Alps on an elephant, conquering nations. It wasn't until I went to my grandmother's house in Memphis and she had the black calendar, and it showed him as a black man. And so I think when we interject CRT, I just think African American history is American history. I think, one lady at the poll told me that we don't talk about the Japanese concentration camps that were on the West Coast. That's American history. And I just think we gotta be open, and not trying to dictate it left or right, but just say, these are the things that happen. When you think about Ruby Bridges, she was stopped at the door. And so the CRT conversation for me is not one that I want to address, because our literacy rates are so low. And if we want to talk about CRT, that takes reading. And again, we have some schools that are in the single digits on literacy levels, on math levels. And so I want to stay away from all the smoke and really address the issues that are before us. That's why I didn't get up.
So I'll get up. So critical race theory, for anyone that doesn't know, it's a legal theory that happens somewhere in second year law school, something. So I have an associate degree, I have a bachelor's, master's, PhD. Critical race theory was not a part of any of my education training or educational training. And so what I have seen, and in the investigation that I have seen around what the propaganda is around critical race theory, is really teaching history. I know in second grade, my son was a second grader last year. He brought books home about Martin Luther King. Families had a problem learning about Martin Luther King, even though it's a national holiday. We didn't have, and I talked to all kinds of families about, what their thoughts were around learning about Martin Luther King and all of that, and we didn't hear any concerns around it. Another book that he got in second grade was Ruby Bridges Goes to School. She is the first African American to integrate schools. It's a part of our American history. Again, talk to families across our community to see what the concerns were around accurate history. And that's what we are hearing as critical race theory, that we're teaching one side over another. It's our history. My mother attended Nashville Public Schools during segregated times. I'm one generation removed, my kids are 2 generations removed. She graduated in 1958. My next door neighbor graduated in 1957 and went to segregated schools, and she was white. So you have a black mother, a white neighbor, it's our reality. It's part of our history, and good or bad, it's accurate history. Thank you.
So with what John said, I think that the bottom line is until our children can read and write at grade level standards, what we're putting in front of them in the classroom is irrelevant if they can't read or write to learn about it. I want my children to learn all history, but I want them to be able to have the fundamentals: reading, writing, arithmetic, and history. Now you can talk to 10 different people and get 10 different answers on what's wrong with the U.S. history system and our school systems. But that's something else that is dividing us. But the one thing and the only thing we need to be focused on is our children being able to read and write. And that's going to be my answer every single time. So until they can do that, nothing else needs to be put in the classrooms to distract them from that and to divide parents, caregivers, teachers. Let them read and write first. Can I follow up with that?
Sure, let's do a 1-minute follow-up.
Sure, I just want to do a 1-minute follow-up and just say, literacy, kids can't learn if they can't read, and we need to make sure that we have a strong literacy curriculum for our kids. But we also need to make sure that our literacy is reflective of the kids in which we serve, right? I have a black son, an 8-year-old, and he lights up and really wants to read when he sees himself in the literature in which he's reading, and it advances his literature. And so it's so important for me to take politics out of this and make sure that we are ensuring that our kids see themselves in their literature, because they're more apt to be engaged, more apt to build literacy curriculum and criteria, increase literacy levels, and build the strong foundation that we want to see. And so that's where I am on it. I don't think it's politics. I think these are ways that we can build strong literacy as well.
Kelly, to be fair, would you like another minute to respond?
Oh, no, it's fine.
Okay, perfect. All right, we only have time for, I'm going to do 2 more questions, and we've received so many great questions from the audience. So our next one is, constituents in District 4 staff often don't receive email responses. How will each of you make this a priority and respond to all, even those you may not like?
I think it's just that, like Nike, just do it. Yeah, you gotta, how I view the school board is a representative. and you have to represent your people. And it's kind of about what I think, but it's really about what is the input that I'm getting from the community that I can take that input and bring it to the school board. And so before I make decisions that are important and that people really care about and they have ideas and thoughts, like I want to make sure that I'm listening to the whole community and taking their thoughts and interject a little bit of mine, but this is what Donelson-Hermitage and Old Hickory parents are saying. But I do have some parents in here who I get a lot of emails from, and they get a lot of responses.
Great question. During the time that I was on the school board, I served about 4 months, was very actively engaged in the community. My phone blew up, constantly returned phone calls, intentionally seeked out responses from families within our community, from teachers, support staff, across our community before I went to each board meeting. I wanted to make sure that I was well informed so that I could advocate on behalf of District 4. And I continue, since then I've served on the Parent Advisory Council. I'm actively engaged in our community now. I'm very accessible, and I just encourage families to reach out to your school board member, really engage. My phone number is there, my website is there, my email is there. Call me. If you can't reach me by email, call me. I'm very, very accessible, and communication is a key for me. I can't advocate on behalf of District 4 if I'm not listening to District 4. So thank you.
So I think any elected official, it's not whether you like what's coming in at you. Doesn't matter whether you like what you hear. It's your job to listen and respond. You were voted in to listen to your constituents, process what they've told you, and act on their behalf. For anybody that wants to write it down, my phone number is 615-708-0563. I've met with 3 people in the past 2 weeks for coffee. Had a play date with 2 of them. Caliber Coffee, by the way, Donelson, awesome coffee. Sort of toddler friendly. You gotta watch out. There's some things they can throw. Just gonna say, didn't have to pay for anything that might have been broken, just gonna say. But it's our job to listen. Now, there's a difference in responding to an email and listening to what they want. You can respond to an email and you can respond to a phone call, but listening to your constituents as a whole is a different thing. And I think any elected official will always do their best to do that. But at the end of the day, what matters and what is reflected is if your constituents truly feel that they are being heard. That is my goal. That is what I want to do. So, yes, we have to respond to every email and phone call because that's our job. But it's not just our job, it's what we're up here doing because we want the opportunity to do it. And we want to make sure that when you get a reply, that you know you're heard, that you're not just getting an answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Last question from the audience for tonight. With the recent legislation at the state with discriminatory bills specifically targeted to our LGBT and trans youth, what steps are you willing to take to protect them in our schools? Let's start in the middle.
So y'all singling out the Muslim girl? No, I'm just messing. No, the one thing that I'm really happy to see, MNPS, and John was on the board, so I'm gonna give him credit. But MNPS has put out a resolution saying that they would that they believe in an inclusive environment for our schools and for our students. Whether that is our faculty, our staff, or our students, making sure that every student, every faculty, every staff across our community feels seen, heard, and accepted within our community. And so for me, that is very important for me to ensure that everybody, no matter who they are or how they show up in the world, has a place within our schools. Thank you.
Whoever wrote that, that's a great question. So I think anytime that topic is brought up, what we have to remember is that our children and our teachers and our support staff are there to do their jobs. They're there to teach, they're there to learn, and they're there to make sure they're safe. So our school system is trying to be an environment where everyone is made to feel welcome and safe, regardless of who you are, what your background is, what your religion is. That should be irrelevant when you come to school. You should always feel safe and welcome regardless. You should be able to walk in the door, know you're going to get an education, and not be judged for who you are or who you are not. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think, just studying social movements, there was a LGBTQ movement that happened in California, and the first time, maybe the first 1 or 2 times, it failed miserably. It wasn't until they started to ask a question, do you know anyone in your family that's gay? And when they asked that question, it made you humanize. And when I was asked the question, I thought about my sister Jeanette, who I love, but who is LGBTQ and proud. And so I think when we talk about protecting, we gotta just humanize it. We can't look at people as just places like these are real people. And so when the resolution came before the board, that was one of the easiest decisions I made. Now I just wish we could do a resolution to say we're gonna continue to increase the literacy rate, but for that's an easy decision. And I think we just gotta humanize and have those relationships.
All right, thank you. I have one more question. This is what I like to call the elevator speech question. So I'll give y'all a minute, just 1 minute, and tell us why you are the best candidate.
Excuse me, I have a question. I don't know if you can do this. Can I do it?
Sure.
Okay, so what are y'all gonna do like for school safety? Like, I don't know, vaping, guns in school, all that stuff.
So I'll repeat the question from the audience. What are you gonna do about school safety, like vaping?
Okay, we can take 30 seconds. When I was in school, if you brought marijuana to school, you were expelled. I think as I went into the schools now, you get suspended for 2 or 3 days. Vaping is terrible. It's not just in private or public, it is across the whole district. And I think we have to build relationships with our parents in the schools. So when we see something like that, we have to find alternate ways and programs. I remember a kid was vaping, and I just had to sit down with him and go over the effects of vaping to show him the health risk. And I think with safety, like I said, parents care more about safety than academics, and we have to make sure our kids are safe. And so one of the first calls I got at McGavick earlier this year was a kid who got stumped and his jaw was broken and it could have killed him. And I just had to work with that parent on the school level, but also just from parent to parent on some things that they could do, because I think safety is numero uno. We talk about mama bears and papa bears, and so don't play with our kids. Don't play with my kid.
He smiled. Aww. Yes, safety is a priority, and I think there are several ways that we can approach this. One, we can come back to restorative practice and ensuring that we are addressing the social, emotional, and mental health of our students and our staff within our schools to address the issues, the challenges that they are facing within our schools. I also think when it comes to things like bringing a gun to school, those are issues that we need to address immediately and be able to address those in a way that maintains safety within our schools. So it's kind of multi-tiered in how we approach this. We want to make sure that we are addressing the needs of students so that they don't have to get to the point where they feel like they're not safe enough and they want to bring a weapon or something to the school. And so I think if we putting those restorative practices and addressing social, emotional, and mental health, it will reduce and eliminate some of the challenges that we're having in school related to that. I am big on disrupting the school to prison pipeline, and by doing so, we have to implement programs that will alleviate some of those challenges. And so the pandemic has exacerbated that, and we really need to focus in on it. So safety is our priority.
So is this a 2-minute one? Okay. I haven't thought about this situation in a minute, so when you brought this up. So when my son was a freshman at McGavick, being a freshman at McGavick is scary, but let me tell you, being a freshman parent at McGavick was terrifying. Because I had to let my child go into this big unknown school. He'd been in school 2 months, and he happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time outside on the North Lawn, and looked at somebody the wrong way. He got punched in the head from behind, knocked to the ground, and stomped 8 times until he was knocked unconscious. The cameras didn't work in the courtyard. There was not an adult to be found. It took me 25 minutes to get there from work. No parent should ever have to go through that. It took me almost 2 weeks to get my child to feel comfortable to go back. I'm sorry, that one gets me. I never want another parent or another child to ever feel that way. So, what I would do is make sure that every student knows that they have a buddy somewhere in that school. Do I have the perfect plan to get that set up yet? No, I do not. But every freshman entering McGavick should have a student that is a junior, that is one person that they know on that big, scary first day of school that they can call and talk to and find, and they are not alone. And that is their friend and their buddy. Because my son didn't have one that day. Our children need to be protected. And if we make them feel safe and know they have a system in place to protect them, that is the first and most important thing. Thank you. I'm sorry I went over.
Thank you. And I will just say to the audience, there were a ton of great questions in here, and I wish that we could address them all, but I think I can speak for the candidates in saying that their inboxes are open to the questions you may have and that you didn't have an opportunity to ask tonight. But I would like to wrap it up with the 1-minute elevator speech. Why are you the best candidate for this role?
I believe I'm the best candidate for this role because I wanted to look at this role as a different role. One who understood how to navigate through the system, but also realized that a lot of our parents who send their kids to school don't understand the system because it's taken me months to understand it. And so when I think about my platform of everybody being college, career, and community ready, I want to speak directly to parents who have kids who are graduating and not only speak to the possibility, but also come up with a plan that's easy, that's already within the system, that can provide relief and more success for the kids that we already have in the system. And so I've worked on a grass tops level when I worked in the governor's office and connecting foster kids who are aging out of foster care with mentors. And I've also worked at the school level of knocking on doors, meeting parents at their home, sitting in their living rooms or libraries at McDonald's. And so I want to take all those experiences and bring it to the board, not only to work with our board, but also to work with our community. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'm running for school board, and I think I'm the best candidate based on my experience both as an educator and as a parent and as a community member right here in the Donelson-Hermitage and Old Hickory community. I've lived here for a little over 20 years, I think almost 23 years. My children have attended schools right here in this community. I have both worked inside Metro Nashville Public Schools and I've worked outside of Metro Nashville Public Schools. I also have a state and national view around education. And I think joining the board previously in those 4 months, we were able to get a lot done for District 4, for this community, and really connect with the families across our community, the teachers and the staff across that community. And I just want to create the community in which we want to see high quality education for our schools and good schools. Thank you.
I will always be a parent first. And if you can't tell that from listening to me, my kids are my number one. Your kids will be number one, your grandkids. Donelson, Old Hickory, and Hermitage. we have an opportunity during this election to change the future of Donelson, Old Hickory, and Hermitage. I have the passion of a parent who has watched my children struggle and thrive in their own ways. I want to take my experiences as a parent, as a community member, and put those to work on the school board. I do not have an education background other than teaching my 3 children, well, my 3-year-old's learning, we're working on that, how to be the best people they can be. I'm a mom first, and I hope that you consider that qualification to help watch over all the kids in our district, because I do. Thanks.
Right on time. Candidates, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your commitment to this community, and audience, thank you for being here. Yes, thank you. And thank you for your commitment to this community, because by being engaged and active in this process and by voting, you are making a change. So with that, thank you, have a good night, and go vote.